Council meeting for January 27th, 2014 in session. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we'll adopt the agenda. Don, any changes?
Mayor and Council, there are no changes.
Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've adopted the agenda. There's no open forum tonight, no visitor. Well, is there an open forum? Does anyone wish to address the council on a subject not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. There is no visitors presentation. The next item is the consent agenda. All items are approved on one motion unless a council member wishes to remove them. Does anybody wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the consent agenda. Bear with me. Next item is the finance portion of the agenda. There are two reports. Well, first the claims roster. We have a motion to approve the claims roster.
I move that we approve the January 27, 2014 claims roster in the amount of $497,844.49.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the claims roster. Now there are two financial reports included, the month-end November and month-end December. These are for information only. If council have any questions or comments. Where is Kelly? Kelly, when do we get the final package for 2013 with the adjustments and all?
We'll do that with the CAFR and the audit.
And that is roughly? So it'll be a while yet. Okay. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make on the financial reports?
Yeah, when you get a point in time.
How about item D? This is something we shouldn't just gloss over.
No, actually. Yeah, just leave it. We'll just
I'd ask Don if he wants to comment on item D.
Yeah.
The pay for.
The paper.
Pay for what?
Your Honor, members of the City Council, I'm going to ask Kelly to come up and address the most recent award that the City of Victoria has won, and this is for our popular annual financial report, a prestigious award by the Government Finance Officers Association. So Kelly, if you just want to talk a little bit about the award and what it means and how that benefits our residents.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The city has prepared a popular annual financial report since 2009. And a popular annual financial report takes information from our city's comprehensive annual financial report, which is something the city prepares with the help of our auditors. It's a rather lengthy document and not very easy to understand or user-friendly. So the Government Finance Officers Association came up with a second type of award you can get for your financial statements for popular annual financial reports. So this last year I submitted ours following the criteria they had, and we were fortunate to meet the criteria for that. The GFOA has currently 3 awards that they do. There's one for your comprehensive annual financial report, which is the big document, the popular annual financial report, which is what we put in the city newsletter. I think it was back in July. It was a ledger-sized paper. We folded in half and did it as an insert. And then they also have a distinguished budget presentation award, which we have not done but may look at doing in the future. So what it means is that somebody independent of the city evaluated our report and looked at it and judged it worthy of the criteria they have for ease of reading for the average user, and yet providing information that the average resident might want to know. So, and there aren't a lot of cities that do participate, so I'm glad we got it because it's a step in the right direction in providing transparency and information to the citizens, so.
Now, you're to be commended. The CAFR it's an almost indecipherable document for most people, and to take the key elements and put it in this kind of secondary report is a real service to the citizens and the residents, the average mom and dad who don't have time to get involved with rec fund and general fund and don't know what an enterprise fund is, and frankly shouldn't have to. And this report makes a lot of that information much more intelligible. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done.
Exactly.
Any other questions? Hearing none, you're free. Donations.
I move we approve resolution number 14-08, a resolution accepting the donations with a special thanks to Natasha Arnston in the amount of $100 to the Victoria Fire Department.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
You've accepted the donation and with gratitude. There is no public hearing tonight. We have some unfinished business. The City Hall Public Works Facilities update.
Mayor and Council, just a continuation from the workshop that we had earlier. So for the audience, earlier this evening we had a workshop to discuss kind of an update on the City Hall and Public Works projects. And a big piece of that is kind of the overall schedule. You know, in order to meet the kind of the schedule that has been outlined, there are some decisions that the City Council needs to make. And tonight what we're asking for is, you know, approval for the architects to move forward with construction drawings for both the Public Works building as well as the City Hall building. And what that means, just a couple of things. One is the building size. Public Works is proposed at 16,328 square feet, and the City Hall's proposed at 12,130 square feet. Based on construction estimates, current construction estimates, the projects as proposed this evening meet the requirements for the $5 million construction budget. The floor plan for the Public Works building includes primarily heated vehicle storage, a wash bay, maintenance area, and office space for our Public Works employees. And the City Hall includes a couple of things. The first floor is being proposed as a library, and the city offices and the council chambers will occupy the second floor. The office space for the City Hall provides room for expansion from a staff perspective of 8 additional people. So literally doubling our staff. And then the last thing is the general appearance. The Public Works building, which we know is a pre-engineered steel building with a precast base, and the City Hall is a wood frame construction, 2 stories, using a variety of building materials, including natural stone, EIFS, cement siding, and a lot of glass. So, as I said, the projects as proposed meet the requirements of the $5 million construction budget based on current estimates. So the city staff is asking for council approval to move forward to construction drawings.
After we discuss that portion of it, then we can get back maybe to the conversation about the financing and questions that council may have.
Before we go there, could I just like to make one comment, please? Last June, we were looking at estimates for implementing or building both buildings, and those estimates were approximately $9 million. And the council challenged Don and staff to come back with a $5 million building budget and an approximately $1 million land budget. And I appreciate your presentation of a moment ago, Don, but you're selling yourself short. Thank you very much. You and staff have done a tremendous job of cutting over $3 million, meeting the challenge that council put forth. And that is, as a council member, but more as a citizen, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to build on it. You've achieved the budget directive you were given, but you haven't done harm to the project. And frankly, that would be worse. I mean, to make the budget on the backs of the facilities would be a real mistake. And I think, as I posed the question to you earlier in the workshop, you know, of the cuts you've made, have you had to do harm to any of the building components? And your answer was
No.
no. So more credit. Jim's comments are richly deserved. Any other questions on building size, floor plans, or general appearance? If we should kick that around a little bit if necessary, and then we get back to the financing questions.
Just more of a kind of procedural thing. All this information that we've had the benefit of looking at through the workshop will all be posted on the web, so anybody who wants to kind of see the latest updates will have full access to it,
That's correct.
the numbers and everything.
That's correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
As well as these proceedings will be on, it generally takes about a day, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, we should be able to kind of get the recording up, I would say, within a couple of days, so by Wednesday. Or if Isaac can move quicker, sooner.
Okay, so do I hear anyone wishing to make a comment about the size, the floor plans, or the general appearance?
I think just reiterate the request earlier to look at what could be done around the sides and back, as we had mentioned in workshop. But other than that.
Why don't you build on that line for the benefit of people who weren't at the workshop?
So Councilmember Crowley made the suggestion that we look at, can we take the stone that is used on the front lower half of the building and wrap that around the entire building, front, sides, and back? Or, as also was presented as an idea, are there other ways in which we can, I guess you could say, decorate the the sides and back of the building because of the amount of traffic we'll be seeing on the trail, as well as if the bandshell goes forward, obviously we will have audiences sitting there staring at the sides and back of the building. So again, what opportunities are there to ensure that it's not just a plain Jane back?
It was understood in the workshop that the differential in cost of running that all the way around is
$15,000 to $20,000.
$15,000 to $20,000, or
A relatively small number in the scheme of things.
every dollar counts, but definitely worth
A
the
look.
expenditure. Yeah.
A review, yeah.
And at the current estimates, there is some excess funds in the budget. Not a lot. I still have to be very vigilant. But also, this does fulfill or it addresses probably the number one comment that I heard at the open house on the 16th, which was to ensure that the building is attractive from all sides, that people would be viewing it. So I think it's a good response to that input.
I think you've got your direction then, Don.
With that, we will direct the architects to proceed, taking into consideration the rear of the City Hall building. And just to continue that discussion, earlier we had a kind of a lengthy discussion about the financing of the two facilities. And so back to the City Council, and we had talked about the use of capital improvement bonds as well as lease revenue bonds and the direction for staff to proceed. So with that, Mayor?
But do you need, and it was suggested, I think I suggested, and I think Jim did as well, and maybe others, it seems intuitively likely or obvious, maybe that's a mistake, but it seems intuitively obvious that we would approach the least cost approach first and leave the more expensive option, the lease revenue bonds, as an option to be used only if necessary. And the necessary means if there's a petition filed demanding a referendum, we would have the choice of acceding to that, have a referendum, or ignoring it. And my vote would be that we would, if it came to that, we would ignore it. But then we'd embark on the lease revenue bond financing approach. So, do we really? I for one, I'm not sure I fully understand. Mike was issuing a caution about there's some timing issues maybe, and maybe even some cost issues that we should maybe understand before we get too far along. And
Well,
maybe
Mayor,
what I think was intuitively obvious is less so.
Mayor and Council, I think the approach to use the CIP funding is perfectly rational and makes the most sense. I'm not a bond lawyer, and so I want to make sure that if you give that direction to us tonight, I will just double check those issues to make sure that we're going down the appropriate path. If there's an issue we can certainly come back and revisit that. We're not making any decisions to finance anything tonight. We're just trying to get the schedule down. And one of the things I want to make sure, though, is that if we do get a good, tight schedule, I want to make sure it's accurate. And there almost inevitably will be some issues with the schedule if we pursue CIP financing, have to address whether or not to deal with any reverse referendum, and then look at alternative financing. So I want to check that out as well. But I think if the council wants to direct that we pursue that financing tonight, that's fine. If there's an issue, well, we'll certainly revisit that promptly.
I think that for me and maybe hopefully for others, the central question is, are we going to go forward, period? And from my perspective, we're going to go forward, period. And the only option is whether we take the least costly approach or a little bit more costly approach, but that's allowed by law. And in fact, we heard today that the appellate court, as you explained, Mike, in the workshop, reviewed and ruled in favor of the city of Forest Lake, that lease revenue bond financing, we're getting down into the weeds here. The lease revenue bond financing is a perfectly legal and appropriate, at least in that instance, and we deem it so in our instance to fund buildings if we had to. And the only question is who would be responsible for the increase in the cost, and let it be known that from my perspective, and I'm going to ask others to jump in, from my perspective, if we end up with a more costly approach, it's because it was forced on us. It's not our approach, but if it's the only way to get the buildings built, and that's the sole mission here, is to get the appropriate buildings built, if it's the only way to do it, so be it. That's my perspective. Others?
I'm in agreement.
Agree.
Yeah, I think it's basically fulfilling our responsibility to make sure that we've got adequate facilities, and we must take the most cost-effective, prudent approach. Period. But we have to get our responsibilities done and build the buildings.
So I hear Mike is going to do some exploring and...
Yes, Mayor, I think taking that as direction that you want us to pursue the CIP funding, I think we'll pursue that, and I'm just going to double check for you to see if there are any other issues that the council should know about as we move down that trail.
Okay. Joe, you wanted to make a comment?
I would just say that I'm in favor of the CIP pathway. I'm definitely just fundamentally opposed on the lease revenue bonds, just because I just feel that we're giving the taxpayer an end around, and so I'd like not to go down that road.
But you're in favor of the CIP?
Yeah.
Then maybe we can get you to speak to your neighbor and tell him to stop.
Let's move on. Do you have enough then, Don, on this topic?
We do. Thank you.
New business, the Wasserman Trunk Sewer Enhanced Foundation Design. The resolution accepting bids and awarding a contract. And Carrie, you might explain, in the consent agenda, we approved the completion of the project. Why don't you link those two for us? The project is over, but it's not quite.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. That is correct. There were a number of items on the consent agenda tonight where we finalized out our contract with Ryan Contracting for this project that, interestingly, I believe we awarded Ryan the project a year ago in January. So here we are. So during the construction of the Wasserman Trunk utility improvements, we encountered some really poor soils down adjacent to the wetland that's adjacent to Lake Wasserman. As is always the case, we did have soil borings in the area, but between the two soil borings that we had, the soils got significantly worse at a greater depth than what we saw in the two borings adjacent to this area. So once we encountered the soils, what we pretty quickly concluded was that they weren't conducive for supporting the pipe, so the methodology that we typically would employ with those types of soils was not going to work. Had we installed the pipe in that location, it would have settled. We actually put a section of it in the ground and came back the next morning and it was already settled quite a bit. This is a gravity sewer line, so it needs to have a minimum slope on it so that the wastewater within the pipe continues to flow, so you don't want to have it settle. If you have a settlement area, what will happen is that the materials within the wastewater would start to accumulate in the area of the settlement. So what we decided to do was direct our contractor to not complete that section of the work to allow the project engineer an opportunity to come up with an appropriate design for that section. We looked at a whole host of options in speaking with both the design engineer, our geotechnical engineer, and then with some local contractors as well as the contractor that was under contract to come up with the most cost-effective solution. Because it was a pretty significant cost change, we made the decision to remove it from the scope of the other project as opposed to adding it as a change order. We rebid that section of work to make sure that we got the best price for the work. 7 bids were received when we opened the bids on January 6th, and you can see there was quite a range in the costs associated with those bids. So the low bidder for the work was Menger Construction. They've done, we did require that the bidders submit specific information demonstrating their experience with this type of work. Menger was able to provide that experience, plus we've worked with them quite a bit. They've done a number of projects in the city of Victoria, so we're comfortable recommending them for the work. So our recommendation is that we go ahead and hire Menger, but we should probably talk about where we are from a budgetary perspective on this project. We've had an interesting swing of change orders on this project. The last one was a compensating change order that was approved earlier tonight on the consent calendar.
You might explain what a compensating...
So a compensating change order, these projects are all done on a unit price basis, and when we get to the end of the contract, if there's specific line items that we ended up using more units of, then we'll add cost to the contract amount, and if there's items where we were able to save money, we'll reduce the overall contract amount. So a big example of savings on this project was we had planned to possibly have to import topsoil. Since we were working in people's yards, I usually include that as an item. You get the best cost that way if you included it as an item, but we had plenty of really pretty good quality topsoil out there, so we decided to not import any. We were able to salvage what was on site and use it, so it was a $20-some thousand savings associated with that change. At the end of it all, though, we have right now, with all the work we've completed to date and the work proposed under this bid award, we'd be sitting about $8,000 over our budget for the project.
Which was?
It was 1.6 million was what we were, Kelly and I were carrying within the budget back when we first started the project. What's not included in that number is compensation to Mr. Traxler for the easement acquisition. That process is still in process. We have our condemnation hearing scheduled for April 23rd, 24th, and 25th. And so we won't know what we'll be compensating him until after that process is complete. To refresh your memories, our appraisal put the value at the property that we were taking for the easement at about $73,000, and Mr. Traxler's appraisal was about $201,000. So at the end of the day, we're going to end up more over budget, more than just the $8,000 that I noted here a little bit earlier in my presentation. So as part of the budgeting process, we included then in our cash flow projections for 2014 additional funds for this project. And what we ended up doing to fit that into the overall sewer fund budget was we deferred major lift station improvements from 2014. We deferred them to 2015. And then I'm going to turn it over to Don because he's also been looking at the overall model for how we're funding the project with development.
Mayor and Council, so what I did is I updated our financial model for kind of the payback to the various funds. So when this was originally put together before we started the project, we made a set of assumptions based on land uses. Well, today we know exactly what the land uses are. So we have two projects that have started construction and houses are actually built, and then another one where a preliminary plat has been submitted and that's moving forward as well. And I kept the number we had initially plugged a number of $2 million for the overall cost, so I just kept that number in place rather than adjust it based on budget and that sort of thing. So the calculation, and we look at this on an overall basis because we receive a number of fees and taxes. So based on building permit fees, water and sewer core fees, water access charge, and property taxes, the actual payback for this project is 5 years. So, and kind of what's happened is the building, kind of the building industry right now has, it's accelerated greater than we had anticipated. So I base this on current conditions plus some conservative assumptions where these subdivisions would only issue 15 permits a year. We expect that to increase significantly. So from an overall perspective, it's 5 years. I expect it to be shorter, assuming that these projects continue to move forward at the pace that they are. So,
Don, had we not gone forward with this project, how many of the currently in-process developments and number of homes within those developments would not have gone forward?
okay, so the model that this is based on without that sewer project, Lake Wasserman Ridge, Lakeside Estates, and the Holla property would not be constructed.
And total houses between those three?
It would be about 250, 300.
And how many more developments after that
In
are
that,
possible?
yeah, I think we projected that there'd be an additional 300 lots on top of this.
Thank you.
Correct, so the sewer is working its way from the west around the south side of the lake. So the developments that have come in that Don mentioned, we are now seeing those second phases already coming in this month and next month. We weren't anticipating those until fall of this year. So what that'll do is expedite that sewer kind of to the east, which will open up the Lennar Lake Town additions and additional property in that southeast corner, so.
My kind of recollections as we were debating whether we make this kind of leap of faith in making these infrastructure investments was that we thought it might be a 5 to 10 year build out to possibly pay this back, but really didn't have a good view of it. So this makes us look pretty smart or really lucky, maybe
Yeah.
really lucky. But also, at the time, I think we had just dipped below 100 buildable lots that were platted in the city. And at the time, we were doing about 65 new building permits a year, and we got real nervous. We had about 18 months supply, and typically 2 years to get new plats on the map. We had 119 new building permits in 2013, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have the number of how many buildable lots?
Yeah, well, my most recent number at the end of 2013, 160. So if we maintain our current pace, that's a 1.5 year inventory of available lots.
You know, the long and the short of it to me is the whole topic of sewers and utilities is, I'm not an engineer, so I don't find it fascinating. What I find fascinating is without this, almost none of that development along the southern end of Lake Wasserman, continuing on now to Highway 11, none of that would be possible.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I think to add on to Councilmember Striegle's comment, I'm not suggesting that council was brilliant or staff was brilliant. Well, I think staff did the right thing and recommended what should be done. But just given all the variables, it seemed to be the prudent move. And it demonstrates, I think in my mind, that city or government is not in the development business, but partnered with businesses, we can help to grow development, and this is one of those examples of partnership.
Other comments? How about a motion?
I move that we approve resolution number 14-09, a resolution accepting bids and awarding a contract for the Wasserman Trunk Sewer Enhanced Foundation Design to Minger Construction Incorporated in the amount of $199,977.80.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the resolution. The City Hall Environmental Report. Don, you're going to have...
Yeah, I'll just give a brief presentation. Mayor and members of the City Council, as requested, the environmental report is included on tonight's agenda. I'll just briefly say that due to odors within the building, some soil excavation last year, which certainly had a petroleum-based product in it, there was an environmental study, including soil borings and indoor air samples surrounding City Hall, primarily on kind of the City Hall portion. The results of that study have indicated that the material that was excavated from our site, which I think it was like 5 cubic yards, so not a lot of material, seemed to not necessarily take care of the problem, but seemed to be the amount of material that had some sort of VOC in it. There were a number of soil borings that were taken along that side of the building and in front of the building. The soil borings themselves found very little contamination, way less than industry standards. The indoor air quality samples that were taken, so we took 3 of them. The results of the indoor air quality samples indicated, again, no really known harmful vapors going into the building, at least when the samples were taken.
When was that done?
December. I'd have to look at the report to get the exact dates.
The ground was frozen.
The ground was, it was frozen or it was becoming frozen. It's a mystery to city staff and certainly to some of the council members who have experienced petroleum smells within the building on several occasions.
I was here that Thursday when you sent everybody home, and there was something mean and foul lurking in your space. It was awful.
So essentially, the conclusion of the report, really, no environmental challenges they found outside within the soils. That may change if we take borings other places, say under this building, and really no explanation for the vapors within the building.
You know, an interesting thing I learned at the last open house, and I didn't know this until I was speaking with an individual who, a longtime resident of Victoria, that before this was City Hall, that was a garage for fire trucks. I did not know that.
I wonder what harm that caused.
Well, they certainly did things differently 50 years ago. So who knows exactly what's underneath the building?
Yep.
I mean, the bottom line is, it's been reported to the MPCA. Our environmental consultant is recommending no further action. We expect to get a report back from them, kind of agreeing with that at some point. It's probably going to be several months to get a response from the MPCA. So at this time, it really is kind of a wait and see. I think historically, when we've experienced vapors within the building, it's typically been spring, summer, or fall. So when the weather is warmer, So I wish I had an answer. I don't.
Well, and from what I read from the report, obviously they don't either, but they do state there's likely related to an ongoing indoor air quality issue. So they do state that. And then I did have a question regarding Section 3 site management decision. I think they're saying recommendation for the site is site closure. And so they're saying there's minimal risk to known receptors, groundwater, direct contact, and so, but closure is recommended. Are they talking the soil area only? What are they referring to when they say that?
Great question. When I ask our city engineer the same question, I mean, and essentially it means that the MPCA should just close the file with no further action.
Oh, okay.
So we don't, the intent is similar to what we did on the Kirsch site, which is the property directly south of us, where we're just going to demolish the building and pave over it for parking.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anything else on on that topic?
No.
We'll move on to reports of the city manager.
Nothing to report.
Let me go first. In your packet is and the last item is the the city manager performance review. It's brief, so let me just read it. On January 13th, the City Council conducted their annual performance evaluation of Victoria City Manager Don Urim. Mr. Urim was evaluated by each council member in the areas of leadership, strategic and organizational thinking, communication and interpersonal relations, customer focus, planning and financial management. Overall, the council was satisfied with his performance. For 2014, Mr. Urim was asked to focus his efforts on improving the level of communication with the council and to spend more time on strategic and organizational thinking. As the city continues to grow, the council feels that these areas will become increasingly important. Mr. Urim was commended by the council for his skills and expertise in the areas of financial management and in managing the day-to-day operations of the city. All in all, Don, a pretty favorable report, but like all of us, there's stuff we can all do better. So, just as a footnote to that, Jim and I, as members of the Personnel Committee, met to discuss a recommendation for a salary increase for Don, and we agreed to recommend 1%. Unless anyone has any issue with that. Go ahead, congratulations, you got a percent.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council.
Other reports? Mike, anything?
Mayor, I don't have a report, but when you get to number 14, I have some comments.
Closed. No other comments here. We're going to adjourn to a closed session.
Yes, Mayor and Council, pursuant to the open meeting law, section 13D.05, subdivision 3B, I believe, which is the attorney-client privilege exception of the open meeting law, I'm recommending that the council and I discuss pending administrative and other litigation concerning data practices and open meeting law issues.
So we now will adjourn to closed session.
We need a motion, Mayor.
I move we adjourn to closed session.
All in favor?
Aye.
We move to closed session.
All right, now this doesn't have to be recorded.
If it's,
Attorney-client.